In my younger years, I thought that sales is all about being articulate, being confident, being impressive to our client while we are selling our offerings and services. But as time elapsed, I realized that that isn't the true story. There is something else that's super crucial. Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in. My name is Kian. I run a company focusing on corporate training, HR consulting, and employee engagement. And right now, we have worked with over 10 multinational companies and over 2,500 employees from 15 different countries. And over our time dealing with so many people, I've learned that sales also is about listening very carefully to our clients. So there was this one time I was speaking with a client, and that day I decided to shut my mouth. I decided to let the client speak and not chime in at all. And so the client, we met, and then we expressed courtesies, and then the client started to share. And as the client was sharing, I did not chime in with any offerings at all. All I did was I listened very intently, and of course I managed my facial expressions and my gestures as well, and made the client feel more comfortable about sharing whatever that they were sharing. At times when I felt it was appropriate, I chimed in with some questions, not with offerings. So I would say something along the lines of, what do you mean by that? Can you share a bit more about what you just shared with this particular incident? And you mentioned that team members from sales and operations departments seem to not have a harmonious relationship. What do you mean by that? When did you observe that these relationships were not as harmonious as perhaps management would like? And I just let the client share. And throughout, again, I made sure that the client felt listened to, and I made sure that the client felt that I was interested in what the client was sharing with me. And of course, throughout the time, I was genuine as well. It's not like I ingratiated the client and made the client feel like he or she was on a pedestal. All I did was I maintained warmth. I wanted to make sure that the client felt comfortable sharing everything with me. And there were times also where I chimed in to confirm my understanding of an issue. So one example would be something like, oh, it seems you have mentioned to me twice that team members have been arguing because of X reason. Would you say that it's because of miscommunication and misunderstanding? And would you say that miscommunication and misunderstanding are prominent issues in the company? And when the client said yes, then it would be like, okay, cool, why do you think so? And then if it's a no, then I would invite the client to then share their point of view. Now, at the end of the meeting, surprisingly or not, the client said, hey, Kian, thank you so much for coming in. It was really nice to see you, and that you're a great conversationalist. And when that happened for the first time, I was really surprised, because I thought that being a great conversationalist was about being articulate, being eloquent, or showing that I was articulate, eloquent, and fluent. But having thought about it a bit more, we would realize that a conversation has two parts. There is the part of listening, and then there is the part of speaking. And on that day, in that particular meeting, I played the role of a listener, which is one crucial part of conversation, and which is why the client thought that I was a great conversationalist. And when I was doing that, I was actually appealing to the principle of liking, one of the 6 persuasion techniques proposed by Dr. Robert Cialdini. So it's important that when we interact with an interlocutor, especially in a context where we're trying to persuade them to comply with our offering or our request, it's important that the person likes us. So that might sound like common sense, but in sales, we often focus on trying to get across our offering and trying to show that our offering is the best in the industry or in the entire world even. That we forget that, hey, when we're speaking with our client, the client also actually needs to like us. And this happens to be the true not only in a sales context, because if you think about it, human beings, we are very emotional creatures, even for ourselves. We often pay more attention to who the messenger is than the message itself. So if you dislike someone, even if the person has great things to say, the likelihood of you listening to them and wanting to digest what they want to share with you is very low. And that probably isn't too good, because as much as possible, we want to make sure that we prevent ourselves from focusing on too much the messenger. And probably even the people that we don't like, and maybe especially the people that we don't like, have many valid things to say. But just because we dislike the person, we refuse to listen to them. And I'm not saying that this is correct or that we should all act like that, but if we know that such a tendency, such an evolutionary tendency exists in human beings, we want to make sure that such a tendency works for our favor rather than against us. So knowing that, we want to make sure that our clients like us. And coming back to listening to the client, when I was listening really intently to the client, what I made sure was that the client felt a sense of importance. And human beings also like to feel a sense of importance. We like to be perceived as high status. In fact, human beings have a fundamental need for status. Psychologists have done interdisciplinary studies on that to find that people who perceived that they have high status are more likely to feel more confident. They're also less likely to be inflicted with diseases. On the flip side, people who feel that they do not have high status are more likely to have a bunch of medical and health issues. So when I listened really carefully to the client, that was kind of what I was doing with the client. I was saying, hey, you are someone of high status. You are worth my time and attention, which is why I'm listening very intently. So that's the principle of liking. One other thing that I was doing when I was listening rather than chiming in, it's really straightforward. I made sure that I understood what the client was saying in and out. And this is where the confirmation questions would come in. So I would confirm that, hey, would you say that X, Y, and Z is true? And when the client would say yes, then I'm appealing actually to another principle of persuasion, which is commitment and consistency. I was getting the client to verbally confirm that this issue was what they were facing. And when I have that verbal confirmation, then the client essentially is thinking, oh yeah, this issue is actually pretty big, which is why I'm sharing. And this person, the salesperson, has hitherto confirmed with me that this issue is big. So when I have that psychological commitment with the client and I then come in with my offering to say, hey, you've shared with me this problem, right now I have this offering that could help this problem. So to put it in less abstract terms, it would be something like, hey, misunderstanding and miscommunication are prominent issues in the office. Client has ascertained that. And now I'm saying, hey, I have this workshop that I've delivered to your competitors, and this has helped to reduce misunderstanding and miscommunication. So to the client, it's kind of like, hey, I have just articulated that this issue is big. And right now, almost immediately, this person has come in to say that this solution is here to help me solve this problem. So I would like to think that by doing that, the client again feels understood. And the client, it's kind of hard for the client to say no because they have just verbally confirmed that this issue is big, and so that now that a solution has been presented, if they were to say no, they are kind of implying that they don't want to solve the problem that they have just confirmed is a prominent issue. So this is what I did. Another thing about asking confirmation questions is that you can understand exactly what the client is saying. Now, what this means is that before you understand what the client is going through and before you have their verbal confirmation, you don't want to chime in and say, hey, I have this solution here that would help. Because if you do that without understanding and confirming that your understanding is in fact correct, the client has a reason to disagree with you. And this is what Alex Hormozi has said in one of his videos as well, which is that a good salesperson does not offer until they have confirmed their understanding. Because if you don't offer anything, there is nothing for the client to disagree with. On the flip side, if you come in with a bunch of offerings and you give the clients reasons to disagree with you, the likelihood is that they would not want to work with you anymore. Because if you come in with a solution that's not what the client is looking for, they're going to think, hey, this person is not someone who can understand what I'm going through. And if they cannot understand me from the get-go, how do I expect a harmonious working relationship with them in the long term? And what this also points to is that human beings, we are emotional creatures, and that we form first impressions very quickly. And that might not be, again, very adaptive or helpful in the long term, but this is what human beings do. And knowing this tendency, we want to make sure that this works for us rather than against us. So the main point about this particular point is that you want to make sure that you don't come in with an offering until you have had the verbal confirmation and commitment that you have a clear understanding of what the client is going through. And this is essentially what I learned. You want to make sure that the client likes you, because if the client likes you, or if anyone likes you, the likelihood of you being able to persuade them becomes increasingly high as compared to they not liking you. Second thing is that you want to make sure that you have the client's psychological or verbal confirmation and commitment. and so that you understand exactly what they're going through, and so that when you do come in with an offering, the likelihood of the client thinking that you understand them and that you have the right solution for them is high. Otherwise, it may be low. So this is one important sales lesson that I've learned. I hope that you enjoyed and that you found something helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.